So then I meet with the architect. I need a building, about 30 to 40,000 square feet, you know. So I meet with the architect. Then we have a chief financial officer. I meet with her so we can make recommendations to the board. Here's how we're gonna pay for it. You know, because again, no president has time to do all of that. All right, yes.
You mentioned the things that are under that verbiage, and you mentioned Breath of Life.
Yes.
It's always been in the regional conference.
Technically, Breath of Life is part of what the regional conferences do. To say that it's under it is probably not accurate. We fund them. They have their own board.
I mean, but it's always been, it's never been under North American Union. I mean, it started out.
It started out under North American.
Okay, so how long has it been under?
You know, I can't tell you. I can only go back to when, by the time I became president, when Dr. Byrd came, that's when we started funding.
Okay. When he came to Oakwood. Now, he was doing it in Berea.
I can't remember, but I think when he came to Oakwood, because when he got it, they had a serious deficit because Elder Pierce had been sick. So they were like $1 million in the hole. So he began to look for funding out. The Lord bless them, now they're out of the hole. So he began to look for funding sources. He came to us, and so we fund them about $60,000 a year.
Each conference, same amount or just different?
No. See, good question. How my office is run is each conference gets assessed a percentage of time. Okay. So we have a budget based on that. Yes.
Is a lack of the funding one of the 4 myths? And does the North American division see light in regional conferences functioning now?
Let me answer the last question first, and then that's a reminder for me to get to what I'm supposed to talk about. But I thought it was important because most people do not know what the Office of Regional Conference does. And it's important, not because I do it, but it's important to understand that collectively, we have the privilege of operating on a higher level than most conferences. There are some things that regional conferences do collectively that you can only do if you're a union. Okay? So we actually operate like a union. Okay? And my office coordinates those things that we do like a union. Okay? So that's the only reason why that's important. Okay? Now, let me answer your second question, because I think it's a very good question. When I was a young pastor, people would say, what the majority culture, what the majority culture wants to do is get rid of regional conferences. Okay? Here's what you need to know as constituents of a regional conference. Nobody can get rid of your conference but you. No matter how badly the general conference or anybody else, and I happen to think they don't want to, because they know they can't. Okay? Conferences are constituency-based organizations, which means that no matter what an outside entity wants to do, they can only do it with your vote. Okay? For example, the Southern Union may want Jerome Butler to be the president. Okay? But they can't make him president unless you vote. So no matter what power, see, people think that just like the church, the local churches, the local church pastors are answerable to the conference is answerable to the union. That's not true. Okay. Everybody get that? And most church members don't think that. That's why when they get mad at you, when they get mad at me as a president, they write to the union, they write to the division, they write to the general conference. They can't do anything. Nothing. Okay? The only thing the union can do is, if the conference president messes up and the executive committee deals with him, the president who ordinarily chairs the meeting can't chair a meeting that's about him. So then the union president comes in and says, okay, y'all say the Elder Edmond is gone crazy. Let's look at that. Okay, that's all they can do. So when I was a conference president, I didn't answer to the union. I answered to the executive committee. So people say, oh, people want, no. I'm telling you, the biggest threat to regional conferences is us. And I'll talk about that.
Is that due to lack of funding?
Well, everything comes down to funding eventually. Everything human comes down. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, let's talk about 4 minutes about regional conferences. Real quick. Okay, now this is not a sermon, so if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Okay, now, yes. My office is in Nashville, Huntsville. Fortunately, I have an older sister with a very large house who is kind enough to say, hey, come stay with me. So I commute. So I'm too old to move. So as long as my sister is kind enough to let me stay, that's what I'm going to do. All right. Okay, now, here's I'm going to tell you 4 minutes real quickly. The first minute is regional conferences. And understand when we talk about regional conferences, we have defined it incorrectly. But let's use the common definition. Most people, when they hear regional conferences, they think black conferences. Right? That is technically not the definition of a regional conference. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so for the sake of argument here, the LAC conferences are duplication of services. What that means is, in Pensacola, for example, you have a regional conference church and you have a state conference church, right?
What do you mean the word?
Okay, a state conference, let's define state conferences. If regional conferences are assumed to be primarily black, then state conferences are assumed to be primarily white. Okay, so one of the myths is, and I'll give you an example of, in Nashville, when I was conference president, 10 miles from my office was the office of Kentucky 10. Okay, so people will see, say, okay, why is it that you got y'all and them? Okay, here's the problem with that. The story of regional conferences, one of the reasons why this is one of the things I do now, is I go around and I do these seminars like I'm doing with you all. Because the story of regional conferences is being told from the perspective of state conferences. Okay? Why are regional conferences duplication of services? In other words, if you have Kentucky 10 and South Central, why is the assumption that South Central is unnecessary? Okay. When I was president, I was on the board of trustees of Southern Adventist University, which is a fine school. If my children didn't go to Oakwood, I was sent to the South. Okay? There was never a time, well, right after I got this job, Oakwood asked me to come and talk to a theology minister. Elder Edmond, tell us why we need regional conference. I said, I'm glad to do that. And you know what I said to them? I started off, I said, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor. But here's the thing. I was on the board of trustees for 7 years at Southern. No one ever said to us on the board, we need to explain to these young people why there's a need for state conference. Nobody ever said that. The assumption is state conferences are the norm, regional conferences are the aberration. Okay? One of the things I'm going to tell you later is, the assumption is, the way we're going to fix the disunity in the church is all y'all close down your stuff and come to us. Okay? That's the definition of diversity, is you come to us. Okay? So, one of the myths is their duplication of services. But look here, South Central, right? Inside South Central, you have Kentucky 10, Gulf States, Georgia Conference. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Each of those conferences has their own conference office, a vice president, a president, vice president. That's what we call a conference secretary. Vice president and a conference treasurer. They have ABC Academy and Campground. Okay. So there are 3 of those inside of South Central that only has 1, right? You follow me? In other words, Gulf States has an office, Kentucky 10 has an office, Georgia Cumberland has virtually all in South Central's territory. So, who's duplicating services? Regional conferences where you have 1 of those, or state conferences where you have 3 of those. But when was the last time you heard that state conferences are duplication of services? Okay.
Are they in the same territory, region?
Yes. Okay, and I'll give you now, Georgia Cumberland goes a little outside of South Central. Okay, but basically their territory is the same thing. Here's another way to look at it. There are 58 conferences in the North American division. 9 of them are regional conferences, which means to a large degree, the 9 of us cover the same territory that the 48 of them do. Who's duplicating services? The problem is we have allowed the narrative to be told from one side, right? I remember a very prominent preacher. I heard him. When he was preaching, he said, we need to get rid of regional conferences. Then in his sermon, this is what he said. He said, there are regional conferences and there are normal conferences. Now, he's not a bad person. He didn't mean that. I don't think he meant that the way it sounds. Okay? But listen, there is an assumption. And if you think about it, it is shared by a number of us. Okay? A number of African Americans, right? That automatically what the majority culture has is better than what we do. Now, that doesn't mean that that assumption is mean-spirited. I lived outside the United States the first couple of years of my ministry. All of you, almost all of you who are born in the United States have a cultural bias for things in the United States. We automatically think that the way that we do things in the United States is better. We just do. We just do. Okay? I'll give you an example. If you hear somebody who's from the Caribbean, for example, when you hear them talk, in your minds, they have an accent. That's what you say. They have an accent. In your mind, you don't have an accent. They have an accent. Okay? So when I was a young pastor, and I started off in the Caribbean. So I was a young pastor. The first time I heard them talk about the last book in the Conflict of Ages series, they called it the Great Controversy because they put the accent on the different syllables. But in our minds, it's controversy. In their minds, it's controversy. Controversy. But that's not the point. The point is, we automatically assume that they're wrong, that their pronunciation is not correct. There's a cultural bias. There's also a cultural bias in the majority. There just is. Doesn't make them bad. Any more than us thinking that the United States is, yeah, it just is. Now, the problem becomes when you act on that cultural bias. When you basically say that our way is better and there's something wrong with you, we're going to make you do things hard. Yes.
I appreciate your line of talking. So let me ask you just one question and rephrase my first question. Other than workshops like you're doing, what's being done on the national level to change the narrative such that it reflects our true story? The second question, again, rephrased like the first one. Does the North American division see regional conference as a supplement to what they're doing, or do they value us as a part of the overall work, in tandem, overall work?
I can only speak for the current North American division leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, he's different. Yeah, he's different. I do think the current leadership values, and I don't think that there's a maliciousness amongst his colleagues. I just think there's a lack of knowledge. Okay?
So is the mission wrong?
Pardon?
Is the mission, because you mentioned current leadership, so is the mission of the church incorrect? Because if, what you're implying is that if this leadership changes, and the next leadership sees it differently, then it's gonna change again. So it's overall mission
No,
of
the
the world
mission,
church.
yeah, it's like what I said today. There's nothing wrong with the church.
Okay,
The problem is the people. And you can get people who I think in my dealings, a lot of this is more reflexive and done out of ignorance. You know, I don't think there's a bunch of people sitting around saying, you know what, let's see how we can do in regional conference. I don't think that's the case. I think there is an assumption that just without even thinking about it. I don't even think people who don't work in regional conferences think about regional conferences other than to say, okay, we probably ought not to have two separate entities, and you know, we're open to you all coming. The way we're going to fix this is you all shut down and you come to us. You know, and I think most of that is non-malicious ignorance. We've never been exposed. You know, so when you ask what is being done, there's a couple of things. I think a couple of things are being done. One is to have these kind of conversations. You know, and I've started to go around the country. And ironically enough, I was in your former pastor's church, Elder Collins, 2 weeks ago, having the same conversation in Omaha, Nebraska, because this is a conversation we have to have. Number one. Then number two. Our biggest problem is the lack of education. If you think about it, there's no place that you can go anywhere in the world to find out the contributions that